Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Max Edwards. I am the US-based sales engineer for Kakapo Systems, and today I am very excited to go over our product, Keep My Place in Queue. Now, what I'd like to accomplish in this webinar, first and foremost, I want to define what Keep My Place in Queue is. We'll talk about, how it works. We'll do a live demonstration. We'll talk a little bit about the configuration, and then what we'll do is we'll go over how it's going to help you, some common use case examples that we normally see, and then we'll break it up off for question and answers. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, before I dive directly into what Keep My Place in Queue is, I just wanted to check and see if this screen looks familiar to anybody. We have a caller who's been waiting in queue for about 10.5 minutes. We have 9 other callers in queue. Our average speed of answer is sitting at 2 minutes and 8 seconds, and our average abandon time is sitting at 1 minute 56 seconds. So unfortunately, based on these numbers, we do expect many of our callers will abandon before getting to an agent. And this is exactly where Keep My Place in Queue comes in. So Keep My Place in Queue is our virtual queuing and callback feature for BroadSoft call centers. Now, before we continue, I do want to define 2 terms here, just because I'm going to be using them a lot. First one is going to be a callback. So for us, a callback is when you have a caller who dials into a call center. They press 0 to request a callback from an agent. They get disconnected, and then they receive an inbound call from a call center agent when their request is next in line to be answered. And then the other term that you'll also hear me use is a virtual queue. And for us, a virtual queue is just a digital queue. As compared to a call center queue where you'll have people waiting, a virtual queue is a digital queue that callers are not actually waiting in. All right, so now that we've spoken about what Keep My Place in Queue is a little bit, how does it work? So in order to illustrate this, I'd like to use an example. So let's say my colleague Lee, he buys a new computer and he needs some assistance in getting it set up. So he calls into the support line, and then when he calls in, he hears an entrance message that says, if you don't want to wait in line, press 0 to receive a call back. So then Lee presses 0. Lee then hears another message, a confirmation message. This message is telling him that he's going to receive a callback from an agent when his request is next in line to be answered, and that he can go about his day. The system will then hang up on him, Lee goes about his day, and then when an agent's available, the agent will call Lee, and then Lee can get served. Now, that's on the caller side. On the agent side, very little actually changes, and the agent is going to be able to handle that Keep My Place in Queue request identically or almost identically to any other live caller, just depending upon the agent configuration. All right, so now that I've kind of spoken about this a little bit at this point, so why don't we go and take a look at Keep My Place in Queue in action from both the agent as well as the supervisor perspectives. So let me switch to my dashboard here. All right, excellent. So for the first part of this demo, what we're going to do is we have a couple of calls come in, and then we're going to place one more call in as well, and we're going to turn that into a Keep My Place in Queue request. All right, so we can see here at the moment, I have 2 live callers at positions 1 and 2. One of them is currently ringing to me. And then I also have a Keep My Place in Queue request in position 3. So let's see what happens when Michael Smith and Lucy Dickens get assisted by another agent. All right, excellent. So now that we can see that those 2 live callers disappeared, they were handled by Lee, very efficient. We have this Keep My Place in Queue pop-up that appeared. So the way I have mine set up, it's going to prompt me anytime that a Keep My Place in Queue request gets presented to me. I'm going to see the queue that it came from, which is our support queue. If we have a name and a phone number for that user, we'll see that if that's saved, and then we'll see how long the duration is since they've put in that Keep My Place in Queue request. Now, a couple other things I wanted to mention at this point as well. Since this is the Kakapo support queue is set up as a premium call center, I have all the normal features and all the normal things that you'd expect with a premium call center. For instance, I have my outbound DNS set up, so when I place this call back from here, the number that the caller is going to see is the number of the call center. So it's the number that they dialed. So I have that outbound DNS line. When I'm on the call, I'll have the same capabilities to silently monitor as a supervisor. I can apply counter disposition codes. I can escalate. I can conference in a supervisor. I'll have all of those same capabilities that you'd expect. And then all I have to do is just right click like any other Unity phone call. I have all these same capabilities. So let's go ahead and disposition that. Then we'll end that phone call. All right, and then we'll close that out. So that's the first part. The second part of the demo here, we're going to create a couple more keep my place in queue requests. And we're going to look at it from the agent perspective, or sorry, from the supervisor perspective. So as we can see at the moment, we have 3 calls in queue. 2 of them are keep my place in queue requests, and one of them is a live caller. The live caller is queued down in position 3. So we can see that I'm currently being offered the Lucy Dickens callback. However, as a supervisor, keep my place in queue works exactly the same as any other call center. So it's still going to follow that first in, first out prioritization. So if I go ahead, at the moment, Lucy Dickens's request came in first, but if I promote this live caller over here, instead of just having that keep my place in queue request, I now have a live call ringing to my phone. I can then promote Lucy again, in which case that pops up. Or in this case, if I want, I can promote Michael Smith and then have Michael Smith as that caller. Now, a couple other things that I wanted to mention at this point in time. So you folks may have noticed before that with Michael Smith, it says Salesforce contact. It also says it over here. That's because I have my Salesforce tied into Unity. So with your bigger CRMs such as Salesforce, Zoho, Microsoft Dynamics, you can tie them directly into Unity, and that gives you a whole bunch of benefits. Number 1, we'll be able to identify any contacts of record that you have saved by name, so you'll know exactly who's calling. We have the ability to automatically log all calls with any of these contacts. We can add call notes. There's really a lot that we can do with the integration. I can also pop Michael Smith's CRM profile from here if I'd like. All right, so let's see. So let's go ahead and we'll process this real quick. All right, that was quick. We'll go ahead and we will end that live call. And then we'll process this one as well really quickly. Okay, now that I've finished those calls, the other thing I wanted to point out is the fact that these 2 records, these 2 keep my place in queue requests are still sitting here and they show as assigned to me. So the other thing, or the other part of the agent configuration, which we'll look at in a moment or two, is the automatically closing these callbacks. I have it set to not automatically close them just so we can take a look. And then because it's not set to automatically close, I just have to right click and close it. The other thing I also wanted to point out at this point as well is the statistics here. So just like any other metric, or just like anything else, such as calls, web chats, emails, keep my place in queue is a metric that you can keep stats on. So I still have 1 callback assigned to me, but I only see stats for closed callbacks, unassigned, and closed callbacks. So in my stats and the queue stats, I can go into settings over here and I can add in some additional columns. So that way I can see how many callbacks are assigned directly to me. So we'll go ahead and add that, assign callbacks for myself, and then we'll go ahead and add it for the contact center as well. So now we can see how many callbacks I have assigned directly to myself if I'm just an agent. And as a supervisor, I can also see how many callbacks are currently assigned throughout the call center. Just in case maybe one of the other supervisors assigns some callbacks, I just want to be able to keep an eye on them. And then as soon as I close this, you'll see everything increment appropriately. We lose an assigned callback in my stats and overall queue stats, and we gain one in the closed callbacks. All right. So now that we've actually seen how keep my place in queue works, we've spoken about what it's like from the caller's perspective, and we've seen it from both the agent and the supervisor's perspective. How does it actually work on the back end? So there's a few steps related to for configuring the Keep My Place in Queue feature. We do have a guide on our website. It goes step by step, covers everything with screenshots, and that guide is really probably the perfect guide to set everything up. So I'm not going to go over all the steps in detail, but basically what happens on the back end is we need to enable escape calls because in order to create a Keep My Place in Queue request, a caller has to press a digit to escape the queue. Now on the BroadSoft side, all they see is that escape call. So that caller is then gone, they're no longer part of the call center. However, when the caller escapes, the Kakapo virtual queue is what retains that caller ID information. So it retains the phone number of the caller that just escaped. And then as you folks saw, it's the Kakapo virtual queue that's going to hold those requests. And at that point in time, it's going to then direct and kind of take over and override BroadSoft when needed in order to make sure that we're still following the normal prioritization rules. First in, first out. Naturally, we can always promote different callers, we can reprioritize things, but by default, it's going to follow the normal first in, first out. Now, how exactly is Unity able to do this? So as I mentioned, there are a bunch of features and things that we need enabled on the call center. Briefly, things such as escape calls need to be enabled. We need to enable the guard timer. We need to add in some custom prompts. But pretty much one of the most important and key parts of it is technically optional, but we strongly, strongly recommend creating a specific agent unavailable state. I have one here, keep my place in queue callback. Because what you folks may or may not have noticed as I promoted the live call and then promoted that keep my place in queue request is that Unity will actually actively switch my agent state depending on what request is coming up next, whether it's a live call or a keep my place in queue request. Now, in order for it to do that, all we do is we go into settings over here. We'll go into ACD state, we'll go into calls, and then you'll see here ACD state when prompting or processing keep my place in queue calls. You then set it to the one that you created for that purpose. And pretty much once you press OK, and once the license is assigned to the agent, the queue is configured as needed, you're good to go. You can start processing those keep my place in queue requests right away. However, another thing I mentioned as well before is that the agent experience is identical or is almost identical. And that can be controlled under the agent section here, under this when processing, keep my place in queue calls. So I mentioned, I had the prompt set up so it would prompt me to place that callback, and that's what this checkbox is. If I uncheck that, what happens is when a keep my place in queue request is offered to the agent, their phone starts ringing, they answer, outbound call is placed. It's pretty much the same experience as a live caller. The second option here, automatically close the callback once the call is complete. I had that turned off, but if I turn that on, those requests will automatically be closed as soon as the agent's finished with the phone call. And at that point, with this first option unchecked and the second option checked, the agent experience is going to be exactly the same as it was before keep my place in queue. And this last option here, it's good for, if you have an agent who maybe arrives a little early and it's not time for them to sign into the call center to take live callers yet, if they have any assigned callbacks, they can see those and process those before they join the queue. Or maybe they are logging out of queue a little bit early just so they don't get caught on a live call. They can still process any callbacks that have been assigned directly to them, even though they're not currently joined to the queue. All right. So at this point in time, I've actually covered what I wanted to cover on the live demo. So I'm going to switch back over to our PowerPoint here. So, this slide here, we did talk a little briefly about how Keep My Place in Queue is set up and some of the different options. Just to reiterate, we do have that step-by-step guide with screenshots available on our website, covers everything from start to finish. So that's probably the first place I'd go. And really what's needed for setup, you need to assign the licenses to the agents, and then you need to configure the call centers for Keep My Place in Queue per the guide. Now, there's one other aspect of setup that we haven't spoken about, and it's related to something I said before. So when I was talking about how it works on the back end, when I said that the Kakapo virtual queue and virtual call center is what retains the caller ID information of the caller, we do actually need a caller ID visible or present in order to be able to process those requests. And that's really where this hunt group comes into play. So the way that we recommend setting up to keep my place in queue is to put a hunt group in front of every call center that you want to set this up for. Now the hunt group will always be set up the same way. It'll have call forwarding selective as well as call forwarding always added in. Call forwarding selective will be designed to basically redirect any callers without any visible caller ID to a DNS queue or a call center without keep my place in queue set up. And then for anybody with a caller ID present, call forwarding always will then forward them to the DNS queue or call center with keep my place in queue enabled. So callers waiting in queue here after they go past the hunt group, which really just directs them to where they need to go. At this point in time, caller decides they don't want to wait, so they escape. They get the message, we'll call you back shortly. They re-enter queue as a keep my place in queue request. Then once the call passes to the agent, whether it's a live caller or a request, the agent will answer the call, and if it's a live caller, they then start speaking. If it's the keep my place in queue request, they wait a few seconds longer for the other party to answer the phone. And that's it. So now that we've taken a look at what keep my place in queue looks like from both the agent and supervisor perspective, we defined what it is, we spoke about how it works and how it's set up. How is keep my place in queue going to help you? So number one, it's going to be a massive improvement to the customer journey and experience. Just because instead of having to wait, callers can press 0 and get a call back instead. So that really just leads us to the second item here. It's going to reduce your long wait times. There is no limit for how many callers can put in for keep my place in queue requests. So there's no limit such as only 4 requests per agent. In an extreme example, you can have 100 callers call in and put in requests for 1 or 2 agents to handle. And all of that, those first 2 points will really just combine and significantly reduce the amount of abandoned calls you have as a result. Number one, because callers aren't going to have to wait if they have things they want to do. And number two, they're just going to have a better experience throughout, and they'll know that they can call in, put in a callback request, and then they'll get called back when it's their turn, so they don't have to worry. It just makes everyone happier. The configuration is quick and easy. So the first time keep my place in queue gets set up takes maximum of about 30 minutes. Every other time you set it up after that, it'll take you about 5 minutes at most. So once you have it down the first time, it's very quick and easy to recreate, and a lot of the work will already be done for you. And really, the other great thing is that there's minimal training needed to utilize keep my place in queue. As we all saw, the agent experience is almost identical or is identical to what it is before the feature is set up. It's really just a matter of 3 or 4 additional button clicks at the most. So in our experience, there are quite a few common use cases that we see that I felt would be good to share. So number one, doctor surgeries or doctor's offices in general. With doctor's offices, certain offices maybe make appointments for larger centers, or maybe it's just a really popular, well-known, established doctor. Doctor's offices commonly get overwhelmed, let's put it lightly, with inbound call volume. And if you think of your average doctor's office, there's maybe 3 or 4 front desk staff answering the phones, and if you have 50 to 100 people calling per hour, that's a lot of phone calls for 3 to 4 people to handle. Keep my place in queue will help them manage that volume because the callers who don't want to wait can call in and put in that callback request, which will allow the agents to prioritize those live callers so they can handle those live callers, reducing those abandons, and then process those keep my place in queue requests afterwards. Another example for small businesses, similar situation to the doctor's offices. Maybe there's a limited agent pool to answer some of those inbound calls. Maybe it's a really popular small business with a lot of inbound call volume, or maybe they're running a promotion, or there's a new marketing campaign, and their call volume has just really increased tremendously. Again, keep my place in queue is really valuable here because with that limited agent pool, naturally all those, the few amount of agents can't handle all of that inbound volume of callers. Keep my place in queue will allow those callers who don't want to wait to put in that callback request, and then the agents can again prioritize those live callers and get back to those callback requests when they have a chance. Third example would be international businesses, any business with uncommon working hours or, with employees in different time zones. We're a great example. I'm based here in the US, but our office is in London. So keep my place in queue is really valuable for companies that have international presence or have employees over different time zones. Because again, if there's a limited pool of agents who can answer calls in any certain period of time, keep my place in queue can step in, can take some of those live callers and release some of that burden, reducing those abandoned calls, allowing the users to prioritize the live callers, and thus improving the experience for everybody. All right, so at this point in time, that actually covers everything that I wanted to go over. So I wanted to break it off for questions and answers. And it looks like we had a couple of questions come in already. So the first question that I have here is, do I need to increase the size of my call queue to set up keep my place in queue? And the answer is no, we actually don't need to increase the size of your queue. You don't need to make your queue last any longer. There's nothing that you need to do to adjust the size of your queue or the length of your queue in order to utilize keep my place in queue. Now, the second question that I have here is how does keep my place in queue connect to my queues? And so that's a really good question. Keep my place in queue is connecting to your queues via the OCI and CTI servers. We store those keep my place in queue callback requests and the ACD calls in the order that they came in the Kakapo cloud, as we all saw earlier during the demonstration. And the last question I have at the moment is, can we report on keep my place in queue? And the answer is absolutely. We took a brief look at the statistics that we were able to display on the supervisor dashboard. However, in our last webinar, when we went over Vision 360, I briefly displayed the Keep My Place in Queue report. There is a specific Keep My Place in Queue report for Vision 360, so you can basically utilize that report and get any information you need on your customers' utilization of the Keep My Place in Queue feature. All right, so let's see. So any other questions at this point in time? It doesn't look like I have any. All right. Well, if anyone does have any additional questions, feel free to post them as I wrap up. We'll make sure to handle them. But I did want to mention if anybody is interested in a demonstration, a more personalized demonstration of Keep My Place in Queue, if anybody wants to have a further discussion, go a little deeper, talk pricing, please go ahead and feel free to contact me if you're in the US, or I should say in North America. Reach out to me. If you're in Europe, please reach out to Lee. And if you're in a different region other than the North America or Europe, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We'll be happy to assist you with any questions you have, setting up any demonstrations or going over anything that you want to go over. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time. We really appreciate you joining us here today. We hope that you learned a lot about Keep My Place in Queue. And again, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Lee. And have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful rest of your week, everybody. Take care and have a good one.